When you're building a culture of belonging, every word counts. That's why Textio brings the world's most advanced language insights into your hiring and employer brand content. Our industry-leading approach to artificial intelligence and machine learning provides the tools needed to find more diverse candidates. In short, Textio builds more equitable workspaces, guiding businesses and writing more inclusive job posts. And we're building on that success by bringing even more products to the market for all people who share our belief that language matters. Words have power, and at Textio, we harness that power to increase the access and availability of value-driven work for everyone.
Hello, and welcome back to the Clarity Podcast, where you'll not only get the insight to help you transition your career, but we'll have raw, unfiltered conversations about equity and access in corporate America. I'm your host, Tristan Layfield of Career Clarity Solutions, formerly Layfield Resume Consulting. And today, I have the honor of having Dr. Clyde Barnett III on the podcast. So, Dr. Clyde Barnett III is the founder and executive director of Discover Without Barriers, which is an education. Let me start that over. Dr. Clyde Barnett III is the founder and executive director of Discover Without Barriers, an education and leadership consulting company. As a consultant, he directs qualitative research projects for K-12 schools, colleges and universities, and government agencies while providing leadership development and professional learning. As an educator, Dr. Barnett serves as a faculty member and director of the undergraduate leadership program in the Department of Leadership and Counseling at Eastern Michigan University. And Dr. Barnett's experiences in education have positioned him to work towards transformative change, and he hopes to influence such change through teaching agency and advocacy, centering student and community voices, and enacting equitable policies and practices. So, welcome to the show, Clyde, or should I say Dr. Barnett?
Oh, please. Oh, please. Well, thank you for having me. And that sounds a lot more interesting than what actually happens on a day-to-day for me.
Look, he playing coy right now, okay?
Oh,
so
no.
let me tell y'all a little bit.
And right.
Let me tell y'all a little bit about how we know each other. So, Dr. Barnett and I are actually best friends. So we met, 2014, 2013? And we have been friends ever since. And so we sit here, we chop it up all the time on the bullshit that corporate America has going on, the bullshit that higher education has going on. And so when I thought about this podcast, I was like, there's no better person to bring on to read these places than my best friend. Like, this is just perfect. So I appreciate you coming on the podcast, friend.
Well, thank you for having me. Let's cut up. Let's cut it up.
Okay, so I like to always start with a couple of questions just to get the sort of thought processes flowing, and we sort of like to keep it a little standard across all of the guests here. So the first question I have for you is a fill in the blank question, right? Which is the state of higher ed job market right now is blank. What is that?
Ooh, I have like 5 expletives.
Say them all.
A hot ass mess, cumbersome, lacking, behind, right? Like, I mean, you could just kind of take your pick. I don't know if this was a multiple choice question, but I made it one.
Look, that is okay. We're gonna take all of those answers. So why do you feel that way? What sort of informs those opinions?
Well, you mentioned, so I do this research and work across all these spaces. And what is pretty prominent, especially this semester as we mostly return back to an in-person format, is this desire to rush back to everything that we were doing prior to March 2020. And so, many of us, and I'm thinking about like the activists and scholars and, other practitioners that have known that this is a hot mess well before the pandemic. But the pandemic has further revealed for people who maybe weren't so aware of how jacked up things were, that think this doesn't work for us. Like, this format doesn't work for us. It doesn't work for students. It doesn't work for staff. And it certainly doesn't work for those seeking employment at, these thousands of colleges that we have across the United States. And so we've got this cumbersome process, this desire to rush back to something that wasn't working well for us, while also competing with people making, big offers and accommodating our needs in ways that higher education just won't budge. We want to be in person. This anti-Zoom meetings, the lack of flexibility, it's really holding up progress, and it's kind of moving backwards. We have students that work full time and have, families and things. And so in some ways, this virtual format provided some flexibility that they just simply didn't have prior to the pandemic. And for whatever reason, that pisses us off. And so we want to be able to control people and tell them how they should learn and what's best for them, while also preaching equity. So it's like, is it Uchiwali or is it one mic? If we're thinking about equity, which is what people need, and the responding to what people need, then how are we not doing that and taking away opportunities that are most flexible to them?
Ooh, go the hell off then. Yeah. From what I've heard and what I've seen with a lot of people in higher education, I completely agree. It's a hot ass mess. I've had more people in higher education come to me trying to exit than trying to find advancement opportunities in the space. And I think that really speaks to where the higher ed job market is right now. Yes, there may be opportunities out there, but many people are not taking them up on those opportunities because higher ed wants to revert back to quote unquote normal. Whatever that is,
whatever that was,
and a normal that already wasn't working. So why are we reverting back when this was an opportunity for innovation, an opportunity for creativity, right? So yeah, I 100% agree. Now, even though the job market in higher ed is a complete shit show, what tips would you have for people who are trying to find jobs in higher education right now, right? So you found multiple jobs in higher education. You've been on the job search before in this space. What tips do you have for people who are sort of in that area?
I would say ask a lot of questions and do a lot of research. So the first thing that comes to mind is, the murder and execution of George Floyd that happened during the pandemic that, for whatever reason, rippled through everybody. We had this racial it seems like every 5 years when white people catch up, it's a racial awakening, when many of us know that this is not new. And so now all these companies have this commitment to diversity, equity, inclusion, and they've got their statements, and they've got the 3 Black people that go to their school on the website, right? Ask questions about how, the 3. Ask questions about how they actually responded to this situation on their campuses or wherever you're at. Because some institutions are in this hybrid and co-op format. Like, think about the format of the institution you're applying at and how they actually, in tangible action steps, responded to the needs of their community. So did faculty members get, release time for mental health and wellness? Did we check in with the needs and desires of students? How are they tending to even if you think about, you got lots of options right now. So if corporate spaces are offering certain packages for the same job and the same amount of work, then how are you using and leveraging that in your negotiations and your conversations in the higher ed space? So there's a lot of opportunities to really bring forth and get what you need out of these positions, because you can kind of spit and hit a job. People are leaving left. You mentioned it. People are leaving left and right. I think about the student affairs profession specifically. There's a whole mass exodus because salaries are not moving, positions are not changing, and more work is being piled on. And so you're really in a position, if this is work that is meaningful to you, you're really in a position to get all that you need from these institutions in ways that they really kind of have to respond to. They made all these promises. Where are they? So that's my biggest piece of advice. Understand what it is that they've done, what they've committed to, and how they follow through on those things.
Yeah, everybody talked a good game when that happened. Everybody came out with their statements, and
Talking. Yes.
added that one minority or black person to their boards or to their hiring committees or to their
Hmm.
whatever. But what other actionable steps had they actually taken? Hold their feet to
Right.
the fire and figure
Yeah.
out what's going on. I think it's going to really show people what that institution really does. Are they an institution about action, or are they institution about looking good, right? And I think
Absolutely.
oftentimes we find in higher education that many of these
Hmm.
institutions really just care about their reputation. They don't really care about the things that they say they care about. They're just doing it because
Absolutely.
it makes them look good. Right?
Yeah,
That's
and
just
we don't
simply
want
put.
bad press. We would rather, doing instead of not doing bad, we just don't want to look bad, right? Like
Yeah,
it just kind
right,
of it just
exactly.
stays there. And I think about all these institutions that have a commitment to hiring so many. I think specifically about the faculty line. You have so many
Mhm.
institutions. We want to hire 40 new faculty of color in 5 years, and it's like I think that's awesome, but what are they stepping into? Because if those 40 people of color are not the sole correspondents for all things equity, what is your institution doing? And when that 40 push back on what you're doing, are you prepared to respond in ways that can move the institution forward? Or are you just going to push us out as you always have, right? Like those are the kind of questions we need to have. You got options. You can go elsewhere. And I know people who literally their salaries have doubled and tripled for the same amount of work in these higher ed spaces, and when they leave these higher ed
Mhm.
spaces, the salaries have
Mhm.
tripled and they can work from home. So you can stay at home with
Mhm.
your baby, with your kids, with whatever you got, with your dog, whatever, your plants, whatever you got. You can stay at home in peace and not deal with the water fountain talk and the side comments and the awkward meeting where people don't want to talk and they don't want to say anything when they know things are problems and they come at you at the end and say, I really appreciate your voice. I'm not bitter or
Yep.
anything, just,
No, no, not at all. Mm-mm.
not at all.
Mm-mm.
I'm
That's
not
never
speaking
happened to
speaking
you.
from no, I'm not speaking from any personal experience at all of that. No, but rather than deal with all of that, you have options now, and you have a lot of people that I talk to that enter higher ed. They have master's degrees, they have doctorates. They've got student loan debt out the you know what. So, in thinking about that, people have to make the decisions that are best for them. And if institutions are not responding to that, you can go elsewhere.
Yeah,
You can go
absolutely.
elsewhere.
100%. 100%. Those commitments to hiring, 30 new faculty of color and all that stuff, it really all is null and void if you bring those faculty into the same cultures that we've had inside of these spaces, right? Let's be real. What is higher education? Higher education has been an old boys club, an old white boys club.
Right.
Let's just be very
Yep.
real and call it what it
Let's call it
is,
what it
right?
is.
So if you're really going to try and create equitable spaces and be equitable in who you're hiring, you also need to provide resources and you need to shift your culture for them to be able to actually succeed. And you need to understand what you're doing. You're bringing in
Mm-hmm.
diverse perspectives, which means these people are not going to deal with the bullshit that you currently are putting up
No.
with, right? That's not going to happen, which means that you should not be penalizing them for challenging
Mm-hmm.
you. You should be looking at why they're challenging you and addressing those issues that are coming up. And I think
Mm-hmm.
oftentimes, once again, it's about looking good, right? The announcement of 30 new faculty of color is really great, but where's the announcement when all of them leave or all of them quit
Right.
because you are not supporting them, or because their research is too black, or their
Right.
research is too this, or they're too radical, or they're too much,
Mm-hmm.
they're trying to create too much change, right? Where's the article about that? Because that's really what tends to
Mm-hmm.
happen when they make these large overarching commitments, but they don't change the institutional structure that they're bringing those people into, right?
Absolutely. And
It's
institutions have to really grapple with the role that they play and how screwed up everything is. I mean, I'm reading this book called The College Dropout Scandal. And one of the things that this book makes plain is that if you look at our graduation rates across the United States from these colleges and universities, uh, it's a wonder they're still open, right? Like if you got 20,000 students on your campus and you're only graduating 30% of them, what is that saying? That and then what role are you playing in this $1 trillion student loan debt crisis that you only have 30% of your students graduated? How many of those students are leaving your institution
Mm-hmm.
without a
Mm-hmm.
credential and debt?
Mm-hmm.
That's on you.
Yeah.
That's on the institution. So, it's not personal. We have this, we want to talk, like I think about like white supremacy culture is all about niceness, right? They think that,
Mm-hmm.
you're not supposed to say certain things. No, we have to be really honest and exacting about what's happening and the outcomes of these institutions. And that's what those 40 faculty members would come in and do. They would be really
Mm-hmm.
precise about the state of affairs. And if institutions aren't ready to hear that, then they're just going to leave.
Yeah.
The cycle will continue.
Simply put, 100%. And honestly, I love that you said they sort of have to be honest about what role they play in that, because at the end of the day, what role do you play? It's a predatory one, right? Because
Absolutely.
you're advertising that coming to school is going to help you get better jobs, but yet you're only graduating 30% of people. And then let's go
Right.
further into the data that universities don't keep on
Mm-hmm.
what their alum are actually doing. How long does it take them to actually enter the workforce? Are they entering the workforce in the spaces that they studied in? How are you helping them enter the workforce? And oftentimes we don't see that data because universities really don't track it. And it's honestly, I firmly believe they don't track it simply because they know they aren't fulfilling their promises, right?
Absolutely.
And so, yes, I do 100% agree with you. We bring in those 30 faculty of color. They're going to be the people to call those things out. And you need to be prepared to take that lashing. Let's call it what it
Mm-hmm.
is. They go get
Mm-hmm.
you. You need to be prepared to take that lashing and figure out what we're going to do to make some change here. So,
You're so right about
I
that. And in
look.
thinking
Now,
about like when we measure outcomes, right? We love in education to measure outcomes that fit our narrative, or
ooh,
that we can easily place blame elsewhere except for on ourselves. So if we can blame the students, blame the communities, blame the staff, we're okay with presenting that data. But if the data makes
mm-hmm,
it plain that we're screwed up, we don't
mm-hmm.
track it, we won't post it anywhere, we won't publish it. You've really got to dive in to lots of
Yeah.
numbers to get to where you're trying to go.
Yeah, I tell everybody, honestly, I'm a testament to the fact that universities aren't doing their jobs. If universities were doing their
Well,
jobs, what I do would not exist. I would not have to be
mm,
a career coach. I would not have to be a resume writer, because if universities were doing their jobs, they would
mhm,
be teaching people how to do this and helping them enter the workforce. So yeah,
absolutely.
100%. They aren't tracking the data. They aren't tracking the information because it's simply going to make them look bad. Now
Hmm.
this is what we do, y'all. We get on a little tangent, so y'all gonna have to deal with it. You can't tell this how we are on a regular basis. Now we're talking a little bit about this change idea, right? And I think one of the biggest changes that's happening across the board when it comes to sort of the workforce is that we are now seeing Gen Z enter the workforce, right?
Hmm.
And what Gen Z wants is very different from what millennials wanted, what Gen X wants. And so what well, before I even ask the question, I know you also teach a lot of people who are in Gen Z, right?
Yes, I
In
do.
the
Yes,
Gen
I
Z
do.
space. So you're intimately familiar with them, the way they think and process and what they do. So what do you think recruiters in higher education need to know about attracting and retaining Gen Z talent? Because they're the next people that need to come into these student affairs roles. They're the next people who are
Hmm.
going to be seeking those PhDs to become faculty members, right? They're the next people who are going to be taking over universities and colleges. So what do you think recruiters in higher education need to know about them?
I love this question, and maybe my perspective will make people a little uncomfortable. But I love
Ooh,
Gen
I
Z,
love it.
right? I love Gen Z, and they frustrate me, but to
Mhm.
the point that I love it because they don't do cumbersome. One of the words I named when you asked at the start of this discussion was cumbersome. Gen Z is not loyal to you, and they do
Mhm.
not do cumbersome processes. Everything that
Mhm.
we've done to date, they're not with it. They have no loyalty. They have options, unlimited options. they can make money sitting in a wherever off of their phones, right? The options in the sky is the limit. They have a certain freedom that we can only dream about, right? Because we're so hard clung to our rules and processes and procedures, and we like the cumbersome. It makes us feel good because we're accomplishing things. Gen Z does not care about that. So
Nope.
their head and their heart and their work has to talk. There, if you're a religious person, sometimes people say that, you might be spirit led. I really believe that Gen Z is very spirit led. It makes me also think about Lauryn Hill. She has to have her mind together before she
Her
shows up.
chakras aligned before
Her
she gets on the
chakras got
stage.
to be together. Even if it takes 7 hours, the concert's over. It has to be together before she acts. Gen Z is a lot like that in that it has to make sense. Why is this the process? Who said this had to be the process? This whole thing is made up. Why can't we make up new rules? They are Captain Y. And I thought I was pretty, I will ask why. Why? What is the point? Why are we doing this?
Why?
That's totally my question. But Gen Z has taken it next level. So even in the way that I assign things, I have to think about what is the application to their everyday life. The work that they do, it has to be meaningful. This, a lot of people complained about, I'm thinking about quote unquote essential workers. That could be a whole nother separate episode. But a lot of my students work in, fast food or service or customer service or, sales reps, etc., that we deemed essential, right? And so I've anecdotally heard, a lot of complaining about how fast food restaurants are slow, how, the stores are never stocked, and how there's a shortage of this and a shortage. And when you talk to them, they're like, I don't care about the job. Y'all don't care about me. I don't care about this job. Give me my check. I'm going home. Right? So there's no vested interest in who they are. It's more so about control and compliance and getting them to be who we want them to be. So I would say to recruitment managers, if you're just coming with your basic job description and, your company has a bunch of statements with no action, even if Gen Z is not able to name the things in the ways that you and I may be able to, the way that they move is communicating to you that something is off with this place, right? Mm-hmm. So you gotta be prepared to answer all sorts of questions, to reiterate things, and to make it plain. And if you aren't able to answer those questions, you need to examine your processes. I would use them as a litmus test on what's working well and what isn't. If we aspire to the type of freedom that I hear people talk about all the time, I think that Gen Z will lead the way.
Ooh, there it goes. I love that because so many people have so many negative things to say about new generations every single time. We as millennials, we got a ton of flack, right?
Well, I was just glad that they came up with, because, for the longest, it's just been millennial. And I'm like, millennials are approaching 40.
We are over 40 at this point. Some of us are over 40.
Yeah.
We are not kids anymore.
We are not children. We were not born in 2001 or 2002. We've been out here for a little while. So I'm first glad that they got their own name finally.
Yeah, right. We always hear so many negative things about up and coming generations, and I'm really glad to hear positive things. I've recorded a couple episodes. I've talked to a couple of people, and literally it's so funny. None of them have had anything negative to say about Gen Z. All of us sort of think that Gen Z is sort of the impetus for change, right? They're going to be the generation, once again, that's asking why, that's poking holes. Once again, me, I'm a person who asks why. I poke holes in everything too, and Gen Z still got me shook. So, I think it's absolutely great. They really do not. They really love transparency. And if you aren't transparent on what's going on, if they don't understand how it actually applies, then it's useless. They see through the bullshit smoke screen, right? And we really have to question why we have some of these things in place or why we do the things we do. And we don't like to do that. And so Gen Z challenging us in that way, I think is absolutely amazing. And we're going to see it across the board. And I think, the industries, including higher education that are incredibly slow to adapt, they're going to have a really hard time
Mm-hmm.
getting this talent and retaining this talent. And when they do get the talent, having them actually do something for them, because the cultures at these institutions are not about that either. So, yeah, I completely agree. Use them as that litmus test to see
And
what's not
and I
working.
think that makes me think about even college enrollment. Like there's a steep decline, particularly
Hmm.
for Black students enrolling in college since the start of the pandemic. But you know what has also increased is enrollment at HBCUs. So students are seeing, wait a minute, what's this college thing about? Why am I paying that much for me to get to your campus and to be racist as hell? And I got to deal with racist
Hmm.
professors, and I got to, if they go to a really big school, it's culture shock. If they go to a really small school, they're bored out of their minds, right? I would rather go somewhere where I would be celebrated, not tolerated. And it's not to say the HBCUs are just the perfect safe haven, but at least I can go there and I can get a great education. I can be appreciated for who I am, how I show up. And they're welcoming me with open arms and sort of, embracing me like a family member versus just someone to pay tuition. Right. These are the type of decisions that the students, so we build that as, they don't want to go to college. No, they don't want to go to your college. Like, let's be clear. Like,
Ooh.
let's be clear. It's not that they don't want to go to college. And that's a whole, again, we could do like 18 spinoff episodes of this. But this
Yeah.
idea that Black people don't care about education is a crock of shit, right? Like,
Yeah.
Black people value education. You can walk down the street and you can have on a college hoodie and somebody's auntie is going to yell to you about the hoodie. Like, we value
Yep.
education. It's not that Black students and Black people don't value and don't want to go to colleges. No, we don't want to go to your college and deal with your racism, sexism, classism, bias, whatever words you want to use. We don't want to deal with that. So we're going to go where we will be appreciated. And so HBCUs are on the rise for that. That's all Gen Z. That's all Gen
Hmm.
Z. So,
Hmm.
thinking about change, their decisions are inadvertently changing the higher education landscape, whether we like it or
Hmm. And that means that higher education needs to hire people who understand that and can adapt to that to keep
not.
them
Absolutely.
relevant for the generation that is coming up. So 100%
Absolutely.
recruiters, you need to get on it. Now,
Mm-hmm.
I want to take a little bit of a shift now. We've talked quite
Okay.
a bit about questions, but I want to shift to a little bit of sort of recent news or popular news when it comes to careers. And I always try to tailor it to the guests that we have, right? And so I
Mm-hmm.
sent you an article from Forbes that was titled
Mm-hmm.
"The Prestige Hierarchy: 5 universities trained one out of every 8 tenure track faculty at doctoral universities, right? So I'm gonna give a little introduction to this. So according to a new study, 1 in 8 or 13.8% of US trained tenure track faculty members employed at doctoral universities earned their PhD from just 5 universities: the University of California, Berkeley, Harvard University, the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor, go blue, Stanford University, and the University of Wisconsin-Madison, right? And so this article was really sort of talking about how 20% of the PhD granting institutions in the United States awarded the doctoral degrees of 80% of tenure track US trained faculty members employed at major universities across the country. All right. So
Mm-hmm.
before I go in and say anything about what I think, what do you think about this? When you read this, what started coming to mind?
So I'm okay. I was glad to see that I'm not crazy. So, like, when I presented at international conferences across the United States. It is dominated by these quote unquote elite research one institutions.
Mm-hmm.
But what I find, and it's not, this is, I don't mean to generalize, but I'm just going to speak freely. What I find is that it's all heady, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's all theory, there's no practice. There's no real connection, there's no real on the ground work. And so, I think about where I got my doctorate from Eastern Michigan University. At one point, we were the largest producer of teachers in the United States. Like, this was a huge teachers college. Since then, things have changed dramatically, right? And when you look across all of these faculty positions, when you look at the postdoctoral fellowships, when you look at opportunities to travel to international conferences and study abroad, it is the same group all the time. If you go to UC, even if you are whack, like just whack, if you have a U of M or a UCLA or a University of Wisconsin-Madison behind your name, you can float on by. You just can. It's the truth. And everyone knows it, which is why you have heard me say this a lot of times. When people come to me, I want to get my doctorate. I want to get my doctorate. And I'm like, okay, do your research. Don't just go pick up any random doctorate from any random place, because depending on your career goals, one, you might not even need it. But two, if you're trying to enter into, these research one institutions with a doctoral degree from somewhere that's not accredited, I'm sorry to break the news to you, it's not going to happen. It's not, right? It's hard enough for people who go to accredited institutions that are research too, let alone non-accredited institutions. So that's something to think about. But that article was really, really sort of affirming in some ways to know that everybody comes from these same places. But then what does that mean for education if everyone thinks the same? If we've got all these people coming from the same programs, where is the differences in perspectives? Where is the knowledge? And then also the elephant in the room is these universities do not recruit Black students. They don't recruit Black students. They'll have 5 Black students on campus. So I have made a decision in my career to go where we are. So I stay at the state comprehensive institutions, and I've worked at Research Once. I've done it. I've seen it. I have partnerships with Research Once. I know what happens there, but I also know that there is a larger concentration of Black students that will go to comprehensive and community colleges. I know that. And so if all of us are aspiring to these same, 5 institutions or whatever, then what does that mean for the students that go elsewhere? Who is there to assist them, right? So we've got to make those kind of choices in our careers, because it's easy. Well, I say that loosely. It's easy to just go and aim for the elite places, but is it critical work? Right? Yeah. Is it work that's really going to move the needle? Those are the questions that I ask. I don't really get impressed by accolades. When I see someone is going to Yale and they got a Spencer Fellowship, I'm like, duh. Like, that's what
you went to Yale, girl. Like, what the hell did you expect?
Like, duh. Like, I'm not impressed by that, And then what support structures are in place for you? If you go to those places, they've got the funding. You don't have to work. I had to work the entire time. I had 2 fellowships and still worked, right? So people are making those sort of negotiations, and the residual effects as students begin to measure themselves against those things, right? Even employees, if you got your credentials from a university that's not an R1, will you qualify to work at an R1, right? People make those kind of negotiations all the time. They won't even apply at places like a U of M or a Madison, etc., when we need your perspectives there too, And so that article was it kind of just made it on plain for me in ways that I've been yelling about for, a long time now.
Yeah, it was a very interesting article for me because, they list those 5 institutions, and, I went to the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor, love it to death, but, it got its own issues. We know how hard it is to get into those 5 institutions for anybody, first and foremost. Right. But then what does that mean for Black and brown people, right? We know that's incredibly hard for them to get into these organizations. And so if the majority of people the majority of tenure track faculty are coming from these 5 schools, we're automatically counting out Black and brown people from these tenure track faculty roles immediately just based off of admission practices, right? And the other thing that I thought, you actually brought this up, right? It's not common for people to go to, more, or go work at more prestigious universities than where they received their doctoral degree. Absolutely. I think the article said, depending on the domain of study, anywhere from 5 to 23% of faculty employed at universities were at more prestigious universities than their doctoral university. So only only 5 to 23%. So it's not something that happens often, which means we are not getting a diverse opinion or thought when it comes to these things.
No.
I also find it very interesting in this article that they talked about the gender effects, which absolutely are 100% important. But one thing they never mentioned was race throughout this entire article and the impacts of that, which I found very, very interesting. But then they decide to make statements like professors who earn their graduate degrees from less prestigious schools leave the field more frequently than their peers who trained at more elite institutions. So essentially what you're saying is those at regional, historically Black, and R2 universities usually leave the field, right? So
that's what you're saying.
That's what you're saying.
While also having initiatives to recruit 40 faculty of color over the next 5 years, right? So you push them out.
Right.
Wait, come back. Please
come back. But then we're going to treat you like shit because we think your degree isn't as prestigious as ours. So I'm going to bring you in here, but now the faculty are just going to treat you like you don't know what you're doing, right? Another interesting concept, and I want to get your take on this, because we've been talking about sort of this diverse academic thought, right? One of the things they talked about was sort of this idea of self-hire, which is really faculty who are employed by their doctoral university after earning their degree. They also call it academic inbreeding, which I found to be a very off-putting. I don't like it. That's really odd. But basically, only about 1 in 11 of all U.S. professors were people who worked at institutions that they got their degree from. And I started thinking, I was like, I get it, because you want to diversify the thought that comes in here. But we're not thinking about that in the other way. We're only thinking about not having people who went to school here working here. But couldn't that in reality be a solution for minoritized people who want to be faculty? Couldn't their schools decide, hey, we're going to hire you, we're going to put you on a tenure track, we're going to make sure that you get a job, and then if you want to, and we actually encourage it, for you to then find another job at a university. And now it's easier for them to get a tenure track role because they already have a tenure track role at the university that they went to school at. And so I was thinking, couldn't this be a solution to really help people who are not represented in this space?
Absolutely. I think you're pointing out one of the many contradictions of education, right? So on one hand, we emphasize when people, even our article kind of did this, we emphasize when people stay at the institutions they earn their doctorates from, but we don't pay a lot of attention to that 20% number making up 80%, right? Like we just kind of quickly go by that, right? Like it is real quick. So, but the type of partnership that you're talking about is innovative, and what education loves is to innovatively do the same thing, right? So, like that's what it is. We like to innovatively do the same thing. If someone has a vested interest in your institution, why not do everything that you can to keep them there? Why not? We work hard to keep students we could work harder to keep students at our institutions. Why don't we do the same thing for faculty and staff? Why is that so far-fetched, and then just the sort of invested community aspects and insight that individual would have simply off their longevity. We could really rethink this whole partnership thing, because why isn't there a network? Why is it such a competition? If education is supposed to be open and accessible, then why are we pegging it as competition? We could have partnerships with these R1s that, after a certain amount of years, we can open up lines to people in the state, and we could be thought partners across, all these public institutions across Michigan, right? Like we could think differently about this. But again, we're committed to doing the same things because people feel like they've worked. It's like the student loan. I paid off my student loan, so I don't want it forgiven energy. That's the same thing here. I earned my tenure. I earned it. No one helped me, which is a lie, but no one helped me get to where I'm at. So I don't support all of these, initiatives to usher in people if they want to. And I've been in meetings, if they want to get into these jobs and they need to publish in the top journals and and they need to think about ways to partner and network and do their service. And you look at their publications, they haven't published in 10 years. You still assigning the same article from 2012. like this 10 years old. This is why are you still here? You know, you still saying cultural competence after all these years. Nobody says this anymore. Anyway.
I am dead. Yeah, it's just so interesting. And the whole idea of that whole self-hire thing, like I said, I thought that could be a solution. But they also specifically said in the article, the researchers also found that sitting faculty are more likely to be self-hires, meaning that the people who've been here for years were people who went to this institution, got their degree from here, and then started working here. But now, all of a sudden, we don't want to academically inbreed, right, anymore.
That's what I experienced.
I wonder why.
That's what I experienced. So in my program, at the time when I started picking a dissertation committee, and I'm looking at all of the faculty, many of them went to Eastern. But the message that I kept getting is you need to leave. One faculty member even said, not to my face, even said that I think he needs to leave and then come back to Eastern so he could see a different institution. I've been in education for a long time. This person has been at this institution, this one space for 23 years, right? You've been here. So maybe you need to leave and get some different perspective. But that's
I'm glad he didn't say that to your face.
Yeah, it was in his best interest not to say that to me, because it would have been bad news bears. But another thing that I wanted to bring up, so that was one aspect, is that I was getting that same message from people who did that, right? Like, so there's this sort of gatekeeping. But the other thing is that's so fascinating. You mentioned that there's no naming of race. Well, we know that Black women are dominating everybody as far as education, right? Have the most educated group in the world, but certainly in the United States, hold the most credentials, are completing degrees left and right. I mean, like it's nobody's business, but are most likely to default on student loans, less likely to be in these tenure track positions, less likely to be, even if they get into these faculty roles, less likely to be heard and their opinions and their work and their insights valued, appreciated, and respected, right? Like all of that is happening, and that article didn't name it. So if we're thinking about, and going back to this whole recruiting part of it, and of course I'm thinking about faculty and staff, but faculty is kind of heavily on my mind. If we're thinking about doing what's best in the interest of our candidates, how are we going to pay salaries that will combat those kind of issues? How are we thinking about, how our universities are situated in certain communities and what that means for what a Black woman faculty member what they will experience coming to Ann Arbor, Ypsi, Urbana-Champaign, right? Living in the middle of nowhere to work at your institution, like there's a lot of, like our whole person comes with us. Some people can move freely throughout the world, not us. We have to think about where we're gonna get our hair cut. Like there's stuff like, and hair done. I was in San Diego. I was like, where are the Black people? Where do y'all get your hair done? Can't get nothing to eat. Like, where the hair store at? I need some oils. Like, what am I going to do? Like, it's cold. I need a jacket. I don't know what's going on. Right? These are the questions that we ask before we enter into a space that they just never think about. So, are you thinking holistically about your recruitment practices? And to date, the answer has been no. So people are going to make decisions that are best suited for their needs.
Yeah.
You can't be surprised at that. You can't be surprised at that.
Absolutely no. Because most people in higher education firmly still believe that it's a straightforward meritocracy. And that is a lie. That is bullshit, right?
This article blows that up. Like, this
blows that up, right?
Literally blows that up. Like, come on.
Access to being a tenure track faculty member is influenced by socioeconomic status and institutional elitism, simply put. And that constrains the questions that people ask in their research and the bias that they bring to their research across the board. And so, I think this article really just sort of dragged the hell out of higher education and told them, like, look, y'all not as academically diverse as you think you are. Y'all aren't actually asking the questions that you think you are. Y'all aren't actually assessing the data that you should be, right? And I think that's no news to you or I, but I think it's something that is good to enlighten other people about, right? This podcast is geared toward the Black and brown communities, and sometimes there, you know, people who are trying to get into those type of roles in universities, they're sort of gaslit and sort of felt like what's happening to them is not actually what's happening to them, and in reality, it is. There's research out there to back it up, and I want y'all to know that you're not crazy. Like, there's a reason that it's hard for you to get to where you're trying to go in those spaces. So,
and it has nothing to do with your merit and abilities. You know, we start to internalize it like is something wrong with us. No, this system is screwed up, and that's just what it is.
Look, if there's anything to tell you that, I have more publications than some people who are tenure track faculty, and all I have is a bachelor's degree, so it has nothing to do with your merit. Okay,
Not to mention back in the day, the tenure requirements were real lackluster, right? Like you didn't have to do too much of anything. These days, you have to damn near run a university out of your office in order to get tenure. So try again.
Look, we can have this conversation for hours. This is what we do. Usually, you know, I lied to y'all at the beginning of the first episode, told y'all 20 to 30 minute episodes. We're going on minute 45 here. But, you know, this is such a good conversation. I always have great conversations with you, my friend. I really, really, really appreciate you taking the time out to do this with me. I know you're a busy guy. You got to go teach in a few minutes and all those things. So we're going to go ahead and wrap up here. Thank you once again for all of your insight, your wisdom, and your time for coming on the podcast. And just let people know where they can find you on these internet streets. That's a funny question for you, but let people know where they can find you on these internet streets.
So I'll say thank you for having me. You know that I'm always down to talk about education till I'm blue in the face. I'm all on Twitter and LinkedIn. You can just search my name and you'll be able to find me, Clyde Barnett. My handle is at Dr. CBIII, DRCBIII. I post all the time on LinkedIn articles and updates about what's going on. So feel free to connect with me on those platforms.
Yes. Make sure to connect with him. I'm telling you, he has some great ideas about education, challenging the status quo. So go ahead and check it out. So once again, I appreciate you coming on the podcast. And until next time, everybody, we'll see you soon.
Living Corporate is brought to you by Doximity. Doximity helps over 2 million medical professionals. We are the largest medical network that includes over 80% of physicians and over 50% of physician assistants and nurse practitioners. We don't take that responsibility lightly and committed to working towards a more equitable world inside and beyond our virtual office walls. If you want to learn more about Doximity, check out your app store at DOXIMITY. That's DOXIMITY.